president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end.
We really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job.
In light of what has come out, it's painfully obvious President Biden should not have run.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Happy Monday. Tonight on America Decides, Joe Biden, cancer. Former President Biden has an aggressive form of prostate cancer, one that has already spread to one bone in his body, maybe more, but at least one. What we're learning about his condition and possible treatment options, as Vice President Vance, as you just heard, questions Biden's past health while serving as president. Meanwhile, President Trump is seeking to seal a deal with House Republicans. He's going to meet with them tomorrow as the 1,000-plus page bill, with much of his agenda in it, heads to the all-important Rules Committee. You got to go to the Rules Committee before you can take it to the floor. That Rules Committee is scheduled to meet to consider this legislation at the amazing hour of 1 a.m. Wednesday morning. Before then, though, sticking points, significant ones, have to be resolved. Some of the most conservative House Republican members still not sold on this bill, which has, among other things, Medicaid work requirements, tax deduction known as SALT, and cutting elements of the Inflation Reduction Act. There were phone calls for peace today. President Trump held dueling phone calls with his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts. But with Russian strikes in Ukraine, the question still remains. Is there any serious effort, especially on the Russian side, to achieve a ceasefire and a possible end to the war started by Russia in 2022?
We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something.
We will get back to the Putin phone call in just a minute, but I want to start tonight with Finn Gomez right here at the desk with me and Aaron Navarro in Wilmington, Delaware. Aaron, it's great to have you with us from Wilmington, Delaware. Catch us up on what we heard today about former President Biden's condition, possible treatment options, and the steps ahead.
Major, good afternoon. From about a bit over a mile from President Biden's home here in Wilmington, where CBS News has learned from a source familiar, is where he's staying as he and his family continue to consider the treatments. Now, we have heard no specific update on their choice of how to move forward, as well as where they would do it. As Finn actually reported last week, President Biden went to a hospital in Philadelphia to initially get the test done, and that's where they found that growth in his prostate. What we've heard from medical experts, at least, there are hormonal, in terms of potential treatments, are hormonal treatments to suppress testosterone levels in the former president, chemotherapy, radiation therapy. We know that clinical trials, though, is something that President Biden, when he was in the White House, really championed as part of the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, looking and waiting to see if that's something he would also opt into.
So, Finn, since your name was just invoked by Aaron Navarro, tell us what you know and what you reported last week and the context that provides for what we found out over the weekend.
Yeah, no, what we reported last week was what, just echoing what Aaron just said, but that, that he had undergone some tests in Philadelphia, at a hospital in Philadelphia last week. They found some nodes on his prostate. They were concerning, so that needed to be further evaluated, according to sources from the former president's office. We're also, just one thing, I've been talking to some top Democrats throughout the day today concerning this, and there's been, as you've seen, even externally and publicly, a great deal of empathy and sympathy, what you're seeing towards the former president from the party, and it's sort of paused some of these questions that we had been hearing over the weekend, revolving around the Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper book. The really question is mental acuity, and I just wanted to say that there's been a sense that they'd like to keep those two separated at this moment. That's really they're not exactly the same in terms of what's the questions that are being raised about his health overall.
Well, it may be calming down among Democrats. It is not calming down with the Vice President of the United States. Let's play some sound from J.D. Vance as he came back from Rome on Air Force Two.
We really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. So, yes, that's a political observation about the job he was doing, separate from his healthfulness while doing it. But also central to this conversation, and is not going to go away, even if Democrats think that this might create a momentary pause. Sure. The ability of this president, President Biden, to fully serve out the next 4 years, which he was running for, remains a question Democrats are going to have to reconcile themselves to. Were you setting the nation up for something that could not actually be carried out?
Exactly. And
by talking optimistically about a Biden re-election campaign before it ended.
And as the Thompson and as the Tapper book portend, and as previous books portend, just like from John Allen and Amy Parnes, The Fight, was there a sense, a cover-up from those surrounding the president and blocking like information that was going towards him, but also like more severe concerns that have been reported out, not just from these books, but from other outside reporting, that there was some sort of protection, and whether it be ethical or not, like that there should be more of a spotlight on that. Aaron from Wilmington, Delaware, any insights from you based on your coverage of the 2024 campaign, conversations in and around this topic, which was persistent, but not nearly as much in the rearview mirror as Democrats possibly would now admit it should have been?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, even potential 2028 Democratic contenders are still grappling with questions about President Biden, whether or not he should have dropped out earlier in the race. And just from talking to a small but a quick snapshot of residents here in Wilmington, I met two people who supported President Biden but believed that he should have left the race. And I met another woman who said she has known President Biden since he was a Delaware senator, that said she would have voted for him even if he was in a wheelchair. But predominantly, the conversation about President Biden's health has steered more towards trying to get some accountability from the Democratic Party. And it's just striking again that President Biden's post-presidency, which compared to maybe former President Obama or even a Jimmy Carter, will just be shorter given his age, and it'll largely be defined about his health. Of course, that diagnosis of prostate cancer is another addition to that. Aaron Navarro in Wilmington, Delaware. Finn Gomez with me at the desk. Thank you both very much. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder joins me now. She is also a senior fellow and editor-at-large for public health at KFF Health News. Dr. Gounder, always a pleasure to have you with us. I have read from some experts in this field that it is quite possible, if not probable, that President Biden had this condition for quite some time and that it wasn't tested or diagnosed, but it would have been there for this to be at this advanced stage. How do you evaluate that line of reasoning?
It's really hard to say, Major, because we stopped routinely screening men for prostate cancer after age 70. And so it's certainly possible that he has not been having routine PSAs, which is the blood test that you use to assess for prostate cancer. He may not have been having routine prostate exams. Now, we do know back in 2019, he did undergo surgery for what's called benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is a benign, so not cancerous, enlargement of the prostate. Whether that was done using laser or just straight up surgery, we don't know. If there was tissue from the OR, that would have been sent for pathology. So if there was underlying cancer at that time, that would have been diagnosed and picked up then. But then presumably he would have received treatment to prevent the further spread to the bones.
And Dr. Gounder, would it have been possible for this to have been detected through the standard PSA testing regimen?
It is possible, assuming he had PSAs performed in the last several years. Again, that's not the routine after age 70, and it's because most of what we pick up after age 70 is very slow-growing, not what's going to be killing people. And so it's really weighing the risks and the benefits of testing and treatment in somebody in whom prostate cancer may not be the cause of death. We know many men, in fact, die with prostate cancer, not from prostate cancer.
And very quickly, as President of the United States, one would think that everything would be rigorously tested, and there's a family history of cancer.
There is a family history of cancer, but that doesn't mean that you're at risk for all cancers. And so the cancers for which you are screened is really based on your specific risks, which ones, your age, and factors like that. And so there's not an indication that he should have had increased screening for prostate cancer over anybody else.
Options going forward.
So options going forward, as was outlined just now, hormonal treatments, which include testosterone blockers, so medications like Lupron and Zytiga. In addition, medications that are targeted at the bones, because we know he's had spread to the bones. Chemotherapy may be on the table. Radiation therapy, in particular, with, again, the spread to the bones, may be on the table. But we just don't know enough in detail to say which options will be offered to him. And
very quickly, prognosis?
Prognosis, the treatments for prostate cancer are so much better now. And he has a hormone-responsive prostate cancer. And so he could live another 5, 7, 10 years, assuming something else doesn't happen to him between now and then.
Dr. Celine Gounder, great stuff. Thank you so very much. President Trump had calls, as we mentioned a moment ago, with both his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts today in an effort, might be a tough effort, but an effort nonetheless to achieve a possible ceasefire. On social media after that call, the president said he believes it went very well with Vladimir Putin, but there was no indication of any additional progress toward a ceasefire to end the war. Just that talks, which have been ongoing for a while now, will continue. This comes after a weekend of violence in which Russia launched what Ukraine described as its largest drone attacks in that country since the invasion began in 2022. MTS Tayeb is tracking the latest for us tonight.
Well, it really was a high-stakes phone call between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. And that 2-hour conversation really has the potential to be a pivotal moment in the latest diplomatic push to end the war in Ukraine. At least that's how President Trump framed it. Now, the conversation, it has to be said, followed one of the Kremlin's largest drone attacks since the war began over 3 years ago. Nearly 400 Russian drones were launched over the weekend, killing civilians across Ukraine. Now, in the wake of that assault, Ukrainian and European officials urgently pressed the Trump administration to demand an immediate, unconditional ceasefire. Despite that pressure, President Trump has continued to frame the war as a negotiation primarily between Washington and Moscow. Now, that, of course, is a stance that's raising alarms in Kyiv and among NATO allies. Critics worry a U.S.-Russia deal could sideline Ukraine's security and sovereignty, potentially setting the stage for a future Russian offensive. Now, we have heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said that the call went well. We also have heard from the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who also hinted that the U.S. could walk away from the talks altogether if progress hasn't been made. Now, you may remember last Friday, Ukraine and Russia held their first direct talks in over 2 years. But aside from a prisoner swap, little progress was made. It was, of course, endorsed by President Trump and then later downplayed by him, insisting that only this direct conversation with President Putin will matter. Now, that conversation has happened, but as we understand, President Putin continues to reject a full ceasefire, and Ukrainian officials fear he's using the talks to consolidate gains and to regroup his military. Back to you.
MTS Tayeb, thank you, sir, very much. Olivia Rinaldi joins me now at the table. Always good to have you with me, Olivia. So, as MTS just pointed out, there were these direct talks on Friday, and then Russia launches this massive drone strike over the weekend. A signal, it has to be absorbed by President Trump, that Putin will continue to prove he will attack even while there's all this underlying conversation about a ceasefire or an end to this conflict.
Certainly. And this is also a president who said this war would end on day one with his hand. And we're on day 120, don't quote me on that, but we're pretty far into this, first half of the administration. And the president has not been able to even get an honorable ceasefire by both sides on the table to happen. So they have this 2-hour phone call today, Trump and Putin. Quite notable that before that call, though, he spoke with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and he spoke with him after. But also afterwards, he spoke with all of the European heads, and Trump even said that the Vatican is interested in hosting some of these peace talks. So we're going from, I can do this by myself and I can do it in one day, to I'm going to need a little help, and I got a lot of people that I need to rein in on this conversation, and even the new Pope might be the one to have to play a part in part of these negotiations, or at least host some of them as well.
And he said what struck me as a kind of low-level confession on social media, saying these negotiations have to be done by them because only they understand all the underlying difficulties.
Yes.
Whereas on the campaign trail, you heard this over and over again.
Consistently.
Not only can I solve it, I'm the only one who can figure this out.
Only I could. Only I could. And only I could prevent it. But, you know, he'll say now that this is happening, we need everyone's help in solving it. But I did think there was an interesting omission from the vice president this morning as well on Air Force Two on his way home after meeting the Pope. And he said he believes that President Putin doesn't know how to end the war. I thought that was also notable because we've kind of seen, and I track this closely, the vice president has been getting out ahead a little bit every single time of where Trump is on these negotiations. He said a couple of weeks ago, he said that the Russians were asking for too much. That was the first time we had heard that from the U.S. side, that the Russians wanted too much. And quite notable, especially given all of the history that happened between the Vice President Zelensky and President Trump in that Oval Office meeting on February 28th. We are nearing the end of May, and just 3 months later, things have really shifted in an interesting way. It's clear there is some frustration with Putin.
There's also interesting in the president talking to Putin. He said, well, there's an economic future for Russia.
Yes.
But let's talk about economics here at home.
Yep.
Weekend, the president told Walmart, eat the tariffs and stop complaining.
Yep. Quite notable because Walmart is a huge retailer, and of course, you know, traveling the country, all over this country, there's a Walmart in mainly every single town. People go there for groceries. They go there for clothes. They go there for medicine, for pharmacies. And Walmart this weekend said, look, we might have to start raising prices as a result of these tariffs. Immediately, we saw the president react and say that they should eat the tariffs. And he also said, I'll be watching and so will your customers. Interesting threat there from the president. But obviously, as the nation's largest retailer, they're starting to say, look, we might not be able to keep up and eat these prices that are being raised because of tariffs. Consumers will start to feel them, and there is a political impact to that. On top of all of this, the president says he needs to pass his bill on Capitol Hill in order to offset some of these high costs and these tariffs, because people will get those tax reliefs, they'll get those tax breaks, and that'll be his way of offsetting it. But will that happen before the consumer starts to feel the pain? That's the calculation here. And
Olivia, also from the campaign trail, which you very much remember from 2024, when Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee, after Joe Biden stepped away, said, hey, corporations are gouging Americans and they need to do more to reduce their prices. Then candidate Trump accused her of being a Marxist, a communist, and a fascist.
Yes, that they can't handle prices.
To control prices.
Right, the government should not take part in that, not handle it. Now he says, well, wait a minute. You eat your tariff prices. Eat them. Take those over. Yeah.
Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Trump, as we mentioned earlier, heads to Capitol Hill tomorrow to meet with House Republicans. Next, where his budget plan stands after narrowly making it through the important Budget Committee. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. President Trump's budget plan, well, it scored an important procedural victory last night, moving out of the key Budget Committee. If it hadn't moved out of there, the whole thing would be stalled. But it moved out. Now, in order to keep moving the momentum forward, the president will head to Capitol Hill tomorrow to look House Republicans straight in the eye to get them to coalesce, his word, unite, as they prepare for a possible full House vote later this week. Nicole Killian joins us now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, take it from there.
Well, this is going to be a critical meeting. You know, we have been asking what the president's level of engagement would be in the run-up to this final vote, and so now we know, and that he will be meeting with the House Republican Conference tomorrow morning. And while many Republican aides tell us that the White House and the president have very much been engaged on this issue, as you mentioned, having those eye-to-eye, face-to-face conversations are critical because at this point in time, both the president and Speaker Mike Johnson need Republicans to be on the same page. And the reality is they're not. Now, aides tell us that they are 95% of the way there in terms of this big, beautiful bill, but it's that remaining 5% that still has kind of muddied the waters as Republicans try to put the finishing touches on this package. So can the president seal the deal with Republicans tomorrow? That certainly is the hope on the part of Speaker Mike Johnson.
And Nicole, outline briefly, if you could, the things that still need to be resolved to get this across the finish line.
So one of the key issues has to deal with Medicaid, which has been a big component of this bill in terms of some of the potential cuts or savings, depending on how you look at it, are being made to this package. So one thing that has been a point of contention has to do with work requirements. And many conservatives, particularly those on the Budget Committee who rejected this package just on Friday, want those work requirements phased in sooner. Right now in the bill, they're set to take effect in 2029. But there's talk of moving that as soon as next year, potentially, or early 2027. Republican leaders have insisted, look, it kind of takes some time for states to rejigger their programs. So that's part of why that date was initially pushed back. But that's been a sticking point. And then separate from that, you also have this issue of state and local taxes and the state and local tax deduction, or SALT. There are a number of more moderate Republicans, particularly in the Northeast and California, who want to raise the cap on that deduction because they argue their constituents are paying high state and local taxes. They want to raise that cap beyond $10,000. Right now, the proposal is $30,000, but some want to see it even higher than that. But then you have conservatives coming back and saying, well, hey, that's too high. We don't want to have to foot the bill for that. Where are we going to find the savings elsewhere if some kind of deal is struck there? So those are two of the bigger sticking points. But again, the speaker insists that he can get everybody to yes before this vote gets underway on Thursday.
Much to watch, and helping us guide us through all of it, Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Last year, former special counsel Robert Hur said he would not recommend charges against then-President Biden amid allegations Biden, mishandled classified materials as a senator and as vice president. Hur said a jury was likely to find Biden was, quote, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The White House denounced Hur's characterization back then, and Biden, for his part, said, quote, I know what the hell I'm doing. The White House at the time released transcripts of Hur's interview with Biden. It refused, however, to release audio of that 2023 interview, which we now have. Now, we're going to run long excerpts of that audio so you can judge Biden's memory for yourself. The first thing you'll hear is Biden's response to a question about where he kept documents related to his book, The Cancer Moonshot, and 2 centers under his name.
Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president. It's not a mean thing to say. I mean, he just thought that she had a better shot of winning the presidency than I did.
In this part of the interview, still on that question about where he kept important documents, Biden cannot recall when his son, Beau, died of brain cancer.
What was happening, though, one month Beau died, May 30th, 2018. Was it 2015 he died?
2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that and Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, why do I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office, January of 2017.
Okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in,
Right.
January.
Right. Correct.
Okay, yeah.
We will dig into what you just heard and many other political stories on the other side of this break with our political panel. That's next here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Thanks for staying with us. Before the break, we played a few minutes of audio from former President Biden's interview with then Special Counsel Robert Hur. You heard, made judgments for yourself, but I want to dig into that with our political panel. Joel Payne, CBS News political contributor and Chief Communications Officer for Move On. Kevin Sheridan, Senior Advisor for the Romney-Ryan 2012 presidential campaign and former spokesman for the RNC. Joel, go ahead. What did you hear? What do you think about that?
I heard an 80-year-old president running the free world with a faulty memory, which I don't think was. I don't get the sense that like Joe Biden stammering over his words, stammering over his memory. I don't think that's breaking news. And I don't think that that means that he couldn't perform the job of the presidency, which I think belied what the criticism was at the time. I think what that suggests is that that was a bad look at a time that Joe Biden was taking on a lot of political water, and his political operation reacted the way you would expect a political operation to react, is that they got their bosses back. So everything kind of goes to form there. I don't, there's nothing that I didn't get in the transcript that I didn't get from the audio.
Is it form to listen to that, which anyone at the White House could have, and say, yes, this man has got to serve another 4 years as president of the United States?
I mean, I think the American people, I think, the general public has made a judgment on that, which I think most Democrats who are kind of paying attention understand now and kind of get. I will point out to you, the American people elected a 78-year-old man 2.5 years before that who was old and who rambled and forgot stories and talked about corn pop. And they elected him 2.5 years before that, and he had a pretty successful presidency. So I think a lot of things can be true.
Kevin?
Yeah, there's only two options here. He's either a confused old man who had no business being president at the time, or he was faking
Well, no, he had business being president because he was elected president. The question is, should he have run for re-election and offered the country 4 more years?
Well, there is a 25th Amendment, and I'll get to that. But
okay.
If he was faking it, it worked because it got him out of a prosecution. That was the explicit reason that Robert Hur did not prosecute. But look, any way you slice it, this is a bad look for the Democratic Party. All of the cabinet members have some responsibility for not stepping up at the time. The vice president could have invoked the 25th Amendment at any time. She did not. They let this play out until the point where they couldn't fake it anymore, and they had to get out.
Do you think that George H.W. Bush should have invoked the 25th Amendment on Ronald Reagan? Do you think that Mike Pence should have invoked the 25th Amendment on Donald Trump when he allowed a mob to go after the Capitol? I mean, I take your point. If your point is this is a bad look for Democrats politically, okay, fine. But that's a ridiculous argument. Like Joe Biden was running the country, frankly, better than the guy who's the president right now is running the country.
I don't think the
more cogent foreign policy,
the numbers don't back that up.
An economy that's building at a faster rate. So I'd be happy to have that conversation.
What is more problematic for a president, an interview like that or a president of the United States prattling on social media about Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce?
Yeah, in the second term, I honestly don't know that people care that he talks about celebrities anymore. I think that was shocking in the first term to a lot of people, and now it's just baked in.
Let's dig into talks about celebrities. When you say talks about celebrities, he wants an investigation on Bruce Springsteen, Oprah, and Beyonce.
Well, he's certainly right that the Harris campaign paid them.
I'm very excited.
I don't think that's illegal.
I'm very excited to hear about the investigation into Kid Rock and into.
He doesn't have to pay his celebrities.
Okay, got it.
Your point is that campaigns can waste money in any way they decide to.
They blew $1 billion, and look where it got them.
Can I just make a point here?
Please.
Democrats have an issue of trust with the broader public. I think if Republicans aren't careful, they're going to have that same issue of trust. I think Donald Trump has squandered a lot of political capital and is squandering the trust that the American people have wanted to put into their leaders, and they've tried to inject via the 2024 election. Yes, Democrats have a trust issue, but Republicans have one, and it's growing by every day because you got a president that's unfocused, and instead of talking about how to lower your prices, he's talking about how to investigate Bruce Springsteen.
Or James Comey. I mean, when you're talking about questions of Biden, his stability, his acuity, his mental alertness, is it mentally alert for a president to do the kinds of things that Trump regularly does on social media? Does that not raise any...
James Comey embarrassed himself enough this week. He could probably just stay out of that one. But yeah, of course he's going to have his grievances. He hates James Comey, and James Comey hates him. He's going to be a tweet. He's going to tweet. He's going to, whatever you call it, truth. That's never going to change. I think most of the American public doesn't care anymore. I think that the last election proved
dulled to it.
Yeah, they're dulled to it. It's not interesting anymore. It's on Truth, not on Twitter as much. So people just kind of tune it out.
Joel,
it's a celebrity talking about celebrities. It matters to Joel.
I think the bases of both parties probably don't care. I think the folks in the middle who, frankly, made the election swing one way or another, I think en masse do care. I think that Republicans will pay a price for this in 2026. And I think it's the only opportunity that Democrats have right now to reassert themselves politically.
No,
is Donald Trump looking unfocused.
And Republicans will pay a price if the economy is not in a good place and
not looking
we're
good
not
right now.
And Joel, on Morning Joe this morning, a very well-known doctor said it was clear to him, based on what he has seen, he doesn't treat President Biden, that he would have had this prostate cancer situation for years, if not a decade.
Yeah.
He said it was discoverable, but nobody discovered it. That's led Ronnie Jackson, a member of the House, to say there was a cover-up. There was a concerted effort not to look into things that would have been damaging had they been disclosed to the American public. I'd like you to evaluate that.
Yeah, I don't think Ronnie Jackson or, frankly, any of us at this table are in a position to have an opinion on that.
I'm not.
Other than to say Joe Biden, because of his behavior in terms of not disclosing some of his other frailties, I think does open himself up to that type of critique. But what I would also say is it's pretty rich for Republicans to talk about White House physician's office and operating in good faith. I mean, they want you to believe that Donald Trump is 6'3", 225, which for those people who will be watching the Western Conference Finals is 1 inch shorter and 1 pound less than Anthony Edwards. Like, give me a break.
You got 5 seconds.
This is terrible news for the Democrats. I don't have any more to say than that.
And you extend your sympathies to the Biden family.
And, of course, I wish him well.
Joel Payne, Kevin Sheridan, thank you very much. Calls for violence against judges, federal and state, well, they've increased dramatically on social media. Why rhetoric from the White House and others in the political arena could be to blame for this surge. That's next right here on America Decides. Welcome back. A new report finds online threats targeting individual judges, federal and state, well, they've soared over the past year. The Global Project Against Hate and Extremism found violent threats and calls for impeachment against judges rose 327% since last May. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now to discuss that. Scott, we'll get to that in a moment. It's an important topic, but first, I want to talk to you about important news on the Ashley Babbitt front today, a settlement with the Trump Justice Department. Fill us in.
Speaking of courts and speaking of the federal judiciary, CBS News has confirmed an approximately $5 million settlement has been agreed to by the Justice Department with the estate of Ashley Babbitt. You'll recall Ashley Babbitt was at the forefront of the rioters on January 6th, right outside the House Speaker's lobby, which means she was kind of at the high water mark of the rioters in that very sensitive space at that very sensitive moment when the window was smashed.
And trying to climb in.
The police shot and killed Ashley Babbitt. One lieutenant for the U.S. Capitol Police did. An internal review found it was a justified shooting, according to the federal investigators who looked at the shooting. But this settlement means $5 million will be handed over to the estate of Ashley Babbitt, which is quite a striking thing. And some of the January 6th police victims say it is absolutely unconscionable.
Does anything with that settlement, other than the monetary value you just mentioned, indicate an admission of fault by the government?
We're going to find that out when the settlement papers are file with the federal court if they're public, if they're not
public.
made confidential. It's quite possible part of the negotiations is what kind of statement you make. A lot of settlements in legal cases hinge not just on the dollar amount, but what you say when you hand over or don't hand over the money. There was a status report due in that federal civil case today, but this settlement will likely take weeks, if not months, to hash out.
Thank you for that update, Scott. I really appreciate that. Talk to me about what this data tells us about threats, how they're happening, who's being impacted most directly by them.
The federal judiciary is concerned about this, and judges who rarely speak out of turn, who rarely speak off the bench, are saying this. The Chief Justice of the United States put this in his year-end report, and we've spoken with a number of judges, including federal judge Esther Salas of New Jersey, whose son was murdered by a disgruntled person at their doorstep in 2020, who says this is becoming a systemic thing throughout the system, where it's not just a judge in this hot-button case, not just a judge in this courthouse where there's extra attention. It's becoming a universal issue, which raises two particularly troubling possibilities, Major, that violence is again going to strike a judge at some point, feels inevitable to some people, hopefully preventable. But secondly, that there can be a chilling effect to this, that judges may be less inclined to handle a certain thing a certain way if the chilling effect grows worse. There's a concern this could end up impacting the judiciary, which is difficult to measure, but it's a fear.
And it's impeachment, calls for impeachment, which are a process, but also threats of violence. And they're in two different buckets, yes?
Yeah, both have the potential to chill judges,
Yes.
which is why there's a concern, in different ways. Threats of impeachment, which don't go anywhere in this particular Congress. Short of a high crime of a federal judge, this Congress couldn't impeach a ham sandwich on Main Street. But that said, the threat of impeachment does have a political motive, and it does have an impact. Threats of violence.
Especially if it's amplified, as it sometimes is by significant actors in the political arena, President of the United States, on down.
Yeah,
threats of violence are in a different category entirely.
Far more corrosive, different category, and something we've seen play out, where in the January 6 cases, each judge in the federal bench circuit of Washington, D.C., had some number of threats against them. The judge who handled Trump's January 6 case here in Washington needed U.S. Marshal security, amplified security because of the threats. And this is something that there's a fear metastasizes versus gets back to normal.
And when I was a young reporter, there was a time when I was a young reporter. I covered police news in several jurisdictions in our country. And you would sometimes come across a case where someone who had a grievance with a judge over something that they thought was unjust to them might issue a threat, might do something violent. But this is political. This is spreading across things and amplified on social media in a very political context.
That's what was so striking about the report we opened this segment with. Those numbers show an order of magnitude change. Yes, judges who handle crimes are accustomed to getting some threats from criminals. This is something more pernicious.
Scott McFarland, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. In odd-numbered years, there are still plenty of races to watch, not just in even-numbered years. We're less than a month out from primaries that will decide the candidates to be New Jersey's next governor. Look at the top contenders, including these Democrats you see right there on the screen. That's next here on America Decides. Welcome back. New Jersey is one of two states holding elections for governor this fall. The other, as frequent viewers of this program know, that's Virginia. But New Jersey, Democrats battling to lead the Garden State. Well, they gathered last night for their final primary debate. You can see that right there. They managed, well, it was a primary conversation, so they were clashing with each other, but they did agree on one thing. Listen.
Donald Trump is a criminal, and he keeps breaking laws left and right.
This guy, Trump, is going to come in, as we know, as Steve just said, on everything and try to go after our dollars, try to go after reproductive freedom. He's going to do it on every front. And the job of the governor, which I'll do, is to fight him.
We are facing the most corrupt president this nation has ever had. He's attacking people. He's attacking Medicaid. He's attacking the Department of Education.
Here to dig into all this, Brent Johnson, politics reporter for NJ.com, an outstanding source of information about all things New Jersey. Great to have you with us. Size up this race for my audience. Where is it? I've read that Mikey Sherrill, the congresswoman from the 11th district, should be running away with this because she has a lot of establishment support, but isn't yet.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. She's considered the establishment candidate, the one that many top Democrats would like to see win. But the problem is there used to be something known as the county line in New Jersey, which is where party bosses and the power structure in the party put their thumb on the scale, basically endorsed a primary candidate beforehand. And that got thrown out in the court last year during the U.S. Senate race in New Jersey. So this year there's kind of an even playing field. So but Cheryl is still considered the front runner. Public polling shows her ahead, and that she's more ahead in recent days.
And I want to play some sound from Ras Baraka, who is the Newark mayor, talking about the way people are looking at this race within the Democratic conversation, how that might be holding him back. Let's listen.
There are people up here on this stage that are stoking fear out in the community. They're saying that they're the only ones electable and nobody else is electable. I think if all of us support whoever is the nominee, that person is in fact electable. And I'm going to tell you why they say I'm not electable. 1, because I'm from Newark. 2, because I'm too progressive. And 3, because I'm too black.
Brent, evaluate that and Ras Baraka's candidacy.
Well, Barack is running in the progressive lane. He's fighting another big city mayor, Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop, for the progressive vote in the primary. And they're both trying to surge over Cheryl in this primary. And the whispers in the Democratic Party are kind of that Barack is too left-leaning. And he's saying that some people have whispered that the state's not ready for a black governor. And so he brought that out into the open yesterday and last night and said that, you know, we need to stand up. And as a party, we have to show our left colors, our blue colors, and that's not what this race is about. But there is a concern that while New Jersey is a blue-leaning state, that Donald Trump performed here much better last year than he did in the past, and that it's kind of a little more purpley now, and it'll be more difficult to win in November, again, if you're not a more moderate Democratic candidate.
And Brent, fast forward this to the general. Jack Ciattarelli is going to win the Republican nomination by all estimates. He's endorsed by President Trump. How does that general election look to you? I know we don't know who the Democratic nominee is, but there are some signs where that race might be heading.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough race for the Democrats no matter what. New Jersey, again, is a blue state, but they tend to go back and forth between governors here, between each party. You know, you had Chris Christie, then you had Phil Murphy. It's been since the last time we had a party win 3 terms in the governor's office in a row was 1961. Just 3 years before the Beatles, you know, appeared on Ed Sullivan. So it goes to show you that it will not be an easy race for the Democrats. The Republicans are expected to say, do you want 4 more years of Phil Murphy? But the wild card here is Donald Trump. Trump may have done a little bit better last year, but his presidency has already been polarizing. How does that play out? Does that hurt the Republicans in their chance to take back the governor's office?
And Brent, real quickly, the results 2024 to 2020 showed a 10-point drop for the Democratic nominee. Are Democrats reconciling themselves to that? Do they have some answer for why they did so much more poorly in 2024 than 2020?
Well, New Jersey has high property taxes and a high cost of living, and you'll hear Democrats here talk a lot about how we need to make the state more affordable because that's where they think Republicans are going to attack them the most. And their argument is that Donald Trump has not been good for the economy so far, so you don't want to put a Republican in charge here if you want things to be more affordable in New Jersey.
NJ.com's Brent Johnson. Brent, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maryland lawmakers have introduced a bill to posthumously award Henrietta Lacks the Congressional Gold Medal for her contributions to modern medicine. In 1951, this is a fascinating story. Lacks was treated for cervical cancer at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. It was the only one that was seeing African Americans at the time. Without her consent and without her knowledge, doctors there harvested a sample of Lacks' cancer cells. Now, unlike typical cells, which die after a certain period of time, her unique cells could duplicate over and over. This proved instrumental in medical research and the development of polio and COVID vaccines, among many other medical breakthroughs. This award would highlight both her scientific legacy and the rights of medical patients. That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report is coming up next right here on CBS News 24/7.